Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings and welcome to our Virtual Enlightenment Salon of January 23rd, 2022. We have an illustrious panel of U.S. Transhumanist Party officers and members joining us today, including our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our Director of Sentient Rights Advocacy, Tom Ross, our Legislative Director, Jason Geringer, our Director of Longevity Outreach, Ben Ballweg, our Director of Applied Innovation, David Shoemaker, and our member and founder of the Human Achievement Alliance, Dr. Edward Hudgens. And our special guest today is also a USTP officer, our Director of Energy Issues, John Kerecz, who is also an adventurer, world traveler, musician, man of many talents. And today he will share an epic tale with us about his journey to the edge of space. This journey took place on January 28th, 2014, so nearly 8 years ago. We can consider this an 8th anniversary celebration of this epic flight. So, John, welcome. We look forward to hearing from you, and you have the floor.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Like you said, it's 8 years ago, and in my advanced years, that means that I've forgotten everything I knew at the time I went. That's why we're in this organization to try to work towards living longer and living better. But back in 2014, I went to the edge of space. A lot of people ask me, why did I do that? And I always see, why would you not want to do that? I've when I've done this speech, talked before in front of people, I've used slides from the old Lost in Space TV show and, of course, Star Trek, and things that influenced me when I was younger and made me, love the idea of space and going to space. And, it was a different time in the 60s, and I think people paid a lot more attention to it than they do today. And it just instilled a lot of awe and desire in me. I know I talked to people today about how I remember they'd let us out of school, like when the man first landed on the moon, that we were out of school for that day. That was a day to be given leave from school and given a day off. I remember them pushing the TV setups. If everybody remembers, they'd have a huge big TV, ratchet strapped to a big cart, and they'd push that in the room, and whenever the space flights were, they'd actually interrupt classes for you to see it. So to me, that was a lot more of a big deal than I think it's become to some of the younger people. And so I always kept my eye out on companies that did it. And so that's kind of my desire to do it. I don't know anybody else here who's ever had the desire to go to space. Anybody else here right now had the desire? Oh, yeah. Exactly. So it's a interesting thing. So I always watched and always hoped I'd have the money to do it. And to be honest with you, sometimes things happen, bad things happen, and they give you opportunities. Back in 2013, my father passed away, and I had a little bit extra cash from that. And I thought, what would I want to do? I really didn't care about buying a new car or buying a boat or something. I decided to spend the money and go to the edge of space. So that was kind of how I got there. So it's kind of, and also to tell you the truth, it wasn't just the influx of a little bit of money at that time. It was the fact that when people pass away in your life, it gives you a perspective. It makes you think about things. It makes you think about how short life can be. And, you think about your bucket list. And that's a motivator. I think when other people pass away and you realize that life is not infinite, that there's there might be a calling card for you too coming, that you want to get the things done that you want to do in life. So that kind of motivated me to do it. I did it through a company down in Florida. I always forget the exact name of those. Something Adventures. I have it here in my phone, but that's like I said, my memory is not as good as it has once been with some things. But company, excuse me, what'd you say?
Yes, so it's interesting. This company was based in Florida, but it had ties to the Sokol Air Force Base in Russia.
Yes, there was a contact there. Well, let me move the slide since you see this one. But I love, this is my favorite slide. I just like to say, they say the edge of space, and the summit's not as impressive as some of the heights that they've gone to. The heights I went to was the unofficial heights. Well, let me put it this way: there's discrepancy in numbers. The day I was on the flight, the height and the speed we went on, what I was told and was written on the paper were two different things. So I believe there's only certain speeds and stuff they're supposed to go to. And on my paper was 1.7 Mach 1.7, which I've read is the speed they're supposed to go to now. But he told me we went at 2 at the time, and we went up to 22 kilometers. On my paper, it says only 17. But there's one of the pictures they released. Now, what you have to understand to this, doing it through Russia too, is the fact that I was not allowed to use my own camera. I was given a camera from them, and they also had a camera you can kind of see it there. It's in the picture. It's up in the front, down in the lower left-hand corner in the cockpit. That's what actually, if you did go ahead and watch the video, they shot the video from that. So whatever pictures I got from actually being on the Air Force Base and the videos that were taken were either done by them, or I was allowed to have a little camera they gave me. And I really didn't see too many of the pictures of what I took with the little camera. So it's very interesting. But yes, it was a company out of Florida that has a deal with a group in the Russian government. The woman that I dealt with, her father and family had been government officials. And she told me some interesting stories about growing up as in a governmental family, how you always knew you were being listened to, and not to say things you didn't want any other people to know at the time. So that was kind of interesting. But the company also has different setups with different places. They do things in other countries. They do shark cage diving and all kinds of things in remote areas. So they're all about doing high-end adventures for people. So it was very nice getting there. And I'd just like to say I was treated very well in Russia. I'll change the slide. So this is the only slide I pulled up that I found. It was just a canned picture. But I stayed they had put me up in a 5-star hotel right outside the Red Square, which was very nice. They took me to dinner. I was offered free tickets to the ballet, but I couldn't make that because of my flight. I was there for a little over a week. I think it was 8 days I was there. And the real reason I was there so long was because of the fact that if the weather changed, you had to be flexible and stuff with the flight. As a matter of fact, I originally was supposed to go the beginning of January, and they had an engine malfunction. I had to replace an engine. So I ended up going at the end of January. And I think it was very important to have the engine repaired. I was happy for that. But Moscow was very nice too. Everybody was very nice to me there. There was a great mall there, which was like an old factory that's outside there that's been made into a mall. A lot of shopping outside it. I was always fascinated by there's a McDonald's right there outside the Red Square. Matter of fact, this week when I was talking to Lincoln Cannon, he said he had been there right when it opened in 1988. And McDonald's had what I was told by the woman, I'll call her my handler, because I kind of had handlers that would go places with me and make sure everything was okay. She told me that McDonald's had gotten in, it helped them get in because of them doing the charity work with their Ronald McDonald House and stuff. But there was a Ronald McDonald right in Red Square. There was a Sbarro Pizzas, which I was surprised at. I don't think the Sbarro Pizzas is being that big. And there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken. So that was interesting to me. But it was also interesting to me inside Red Square and inside the churches in there, how they bury a lot of their past political figures and past heroes of the state under the floors in the churches. And it's interesting, if you've ever been to Barcelona, I know the Church of the Family has the people buried underneath the church also. But yeah, my trip to Russia was very nice. They treated me very nice. So that was a nice aspect of it too. I can talk more about that if people want to ask any questions then later or now. So here I put a map on here so you can see. Now I was staying in Moscow, but if you see right up there to the upper right, you can see where the city where the Air Force Base was. I actually went by train to that. It took me like 4.5 hours to get by train to that through the snow and everything. Although it was very nice, felt like I was in that whole thing in itself. I felt like I was in. If anybody remembers the old movie Dr. Zhivago with the train in the snow and everything. Very nice. They treated me nice there. I had my own car, big car, dinner. Very nice. Took that in there and then stayed over the night at a hotel. I was met by another handler and was told some do's and don'ts to the flight to be prepared. I was told to eat a very light breakfast. I was told it was fine to eat a light breakfast because sometimes people get sick from the flight. I was also told, which I thought was quite funny, to make sure I brought some extra underwear because they said there can be accidents on the flight. So, and they have had them in the past. So that was kind of interesting and entertaining. So I followed those rules and ate a light breakfast. And the following day, they picked me up early. We went to the Air Force Base. I don't, of course, have any pictures of that because they didn't let me have any pictures of that. But I think online you can see at the Air Force Base, they do also have a museum there. There may be 1 or 2 pictures, but it is a manufacturing where they do make some of the jets. And they do have a little museum there about the history. Very, very happy and proud to show you that. Tell you all about it, of course. It was a little interesting when you pulled up to the gate, though, at the base. It kind of reminded you of anybody remember the old Stalag 13 and Hogan's Heroes TV show? Very much reminded you of that. A woman guard answered the gate to us, and she could have been a bear herself, the way she was built, and grumbled at you. You couldn't understand what she was saying, though, but they very much looked over our vehicle, looked under the vehicle. You know, they have to look under the vehicle with the mirrors and stuff to make sure there's no bombs or anything. That took a while for them to check out the inside and the outside and underneath the vehicle before we could progress. And then we progressed and got there. And if you watch the video, you can see some of the things. It took them a couple hours. They went over things. Not as lengthy as you think it would be with what you were going to do for the first time. They took me through the equipment. I wanted to show a pressure suit here for a couple reasons, because this is kind of something they don't talk about in the new space shots. But I'll get to that in a second. Just going to say that they had me do a little bit of a health evaluation. Had a doctor and a nurse there. I think on the movie, the movie you see like 3 hours cut down into like a little under an hour. So there's a lot cut out in what was there and what was originally taped. But at one point, my blood pressure was up, and they just told me to kind of relax, and they redid my blood pressure, and they said that's quite common. People come in there, they're a little apprehensive, and the blood pressure goes up. So that was kind of interesting. It really was not the kind of medical exam you'd expect for the fact you were just going to go up in a Meg 29 at Mach 2, but it was interesting. It was interesting just for the experience. And then we went into some other rooms and they showed me equipment they'd be sizing for me, the pressure suit, boots, helmet, and all that stuff. Showed me how to use the helmet, how to take it on and off, how to use the breathing mask and put that on. The guy that was my pilot, I was introduced to him. He described, like don't pull the red lever, don't eject the seats. Which when I came back from the office after this trip, there was a sign outside my door, which was making fun of that idea of somebody pulling the lever and being ejected. But he talked about that. He also talked about in case something does happen and you have to do that, he demonstrated what you would have to do. And he demonstrated actually landing from parachuting by jumping off the table. So it was kind of interesting, kind of a hands through, but kind of a quick crash course. They took me on things. Did talk to me about the pressure suit. That to me is a very interesting thing. Didn't exactly describe that to me, but they told me because of the pressure and the G's that you had to watch, because in the old days when people started flying jets and stuff, that you would have pilots pass out. And sometimes they would not recover by the time they couldn't pull up. So you have the pressure suit. Basically, the way I would describe a pressure suit is, as the G's on the plane go up, it pumps more air and it squeezes you. And it kind of alters the pressure based on the flight and the speed of the ship. But it's interesting to me because I said that it reminds me of how you are with a tube of toothpaste. You know how you kind of squeeze it from the bottom so the toothpaste comes out of the top, and it kind of makes you feel like that. The whole idea there is to keep the blood up into your brain so you don't pass out, so you have enough blood. And it is a very interesting feeling. The G's, like a lot of times we were only at G's at 5.5, which weren't bad, but you realize that makes you feel 5.5 times your weight, and you're trying to move your arms, and it you can feel it. It's very much different. It's an interesting feeling. I did read about the present flights. Now, the reason I did want to show this pressure suit is because right now they're not using a pressure suit in the flights that they do now. I don't know about the X, but I know in the Bezo and the Virgin ones, they have smaller jumpsuits, and they say they pressurize the cabins, and they don't need to. And I know there were times with the space shuttles and stuff when they had stopped that. And then after the one space shuttle had an issue, they made them start wearing suits again. They were pressurized because they say it's sort of a double precaution. I'm just not myself, since I haven't experienced it. I'm not sure how pressurizing the whole cabin affects you and gives you that same effect as like I said, the toothpaste effect. I'm not really sure, but I know when I've talked to people, talk to people with Explore Mars that I work with, they talk about the seating and the differences of how the G's can affect you depending on how you're sitting with the forward motion stuff too. So some of that might be worked into the equation. I'm just not sure. I did read on the flight that Jeff said that he was surprised by the G's, and I think they only hit 6 at the most, which is not bad. 5.5 and 6 isn't bad. I'll be honest, I'll mention this again later, but at the end of my flight, I made it through the G's, and at the very end, as we're coming into land, the pilot said, we're not quite coming in right. So he banked it to the left, and the G shot up to 7.8. I felt like a squished bug, and I would say after the G's alleviated, my salmon from breakfast was all over the cockpit. That's so. I think I joked with people after that. They said he probably did that on purpose since I made it through the rest of the flight. But yeah, the G's are interesting, and I think in my mind, to make the present space program a thing that can be easily accessed by a lot of tourists is to probably figure out how the G's can be somehow affected, that they don't get as much G's. I think that would bother people, especially maybe people that might have health issues. So That's a concern of mine, and I'm not sure how they're going to deal with it. I'm sure they're going to deal with it and work with it. I'm not sure how just pressurizing the cabin works exactly. I'm sure it helps, but I'm not sure. I felt more safe wearing my suit that I said looked like it was from the 1950s. I said about the technology, I went to the edge of space in 1977 technology and wore a pressure suit that looked like it was from 1950. So that's my little thing about the pressure suit. And I'll go on to some more slides here. Here I am after getting suited up, after he went through the whole procedure and stuff. Underneath that, I have the pressure suit on and the boots and stuff to stay warm, because I was in Russia in the end of January and it was quite cold. When I was back in Moscow after the flight, I know one of the days it went down to like -15 at night. So it was kind of cold, just a little bit cold, just a little bit. So there I am back behind the engines, quite large. Not really much to the jet other than engines. You're basically just sitting in front of some engines. There I am strapped in and still looking somewhat happy. Now, I've had a couple people I talked to and they said, oh, well, they weren't too impressed by me going to space. And they said, well, it's a matter of the fact that you had the money at the time and you could go. And to be honest with you, they told me they've had some people that have gone and they've signed up for it and they've strapped them into the cockpit, or they've attempted to strap them into the cockpit. And the people said, no, they couldn't take it. Being strapped in like that, now I'm 6'2". Right now I weigh 280, but then I think I weighed about 240. Very claustrophobic. If I was claustrophobic, I would not have done it. I was not the most comfortable in there at all. Let me just put it that way. So it's something you have to get used to. And I can see where people would go and not do it. So it's a little claustrophobic. You're squished in there, and you're squished in there. There isn't a lot of room. So that's the one thing I'll say about that. It is interesting. You get used to it. The way somebody asked me that Explore Mars. They said to me, well, how did you get through it? Our fear is about, they have the fear with sending people to Mars and how they deal with the claustrophobicness and being in a small confined space. And in my head, I looked at it as I always wanted to do it. I wanted to get it done. And I kept in my head that I knew it was going to be over. It wasn't going to be forever with an endless time limit. I knew within an hour or so we'd be back on the Earth, and it just, it would be over. One of the other things that they did describe to me, I forgot about this back at the headquarters before we got out here at the Air Force Base, was they used a model of MiG-29 to show us the different things we'd be doing, rolling and flipping this way and rolling this way. And then the one thing that he really liked was the thing called the hammer. It was kind of cool, where you just go straight up, stall the engines, and just let it fall straight down before you engage again and go. And that was kind of interesting. They did let me fly a little bit. He kept yelling at me to keep the nose up because, to be honest with you, when you get up high, you kind of lose your perspective a little bit on things. And it's kind of interesting because even when you're rolling and stuff, it doesn't bother you as much anymore. The one time we did a roll and my gloves, we were flying upside down and my gloves fell up against the glass on top. And I remember just going, oh, there's my gloves. And you reach up and grab them. And it was kind of like, oh, there they are, So it's kind of an interesting feeling. You kind of get a little displaced with normality. And another thing I'd say that is nice. Let's see what we did here. I think I put this picture here again. Yep. Getting back to here, then after. So I'm strapped in. One thing I want to say before we get up to here, something I realized I never realized before. A MiG-29, those powerful jets. It's not like a jet you take on a trip. It's not like when I came out to visit Dave that time. I went to Vegas and then drove down to visit him. It's not like those jets. You don't need much of a runway for these things. It's kind of like they take off, they go, boom, you're right up in the air. A lot of power, not much runway. Really don't need it. So that's kind of fascinating on itself. Interesting thing they warned me that they said a lot of people complain about is that, people complain that you're breaking the sound barrier, but they don't hear it. He's like, well, we're not going to hear it. We're the ones breaking the sound barrier. The people down on the ground, they hear it. You don't hear it. Because he said a lot of people are disappointed in that. But it does make sense. What I wanted to say about this picture here is now, if you watch the film, there's only like at one point in the film where you can see the blackness of space off to the one side. Very disappointing because they edited things. I don't know why they did it so much. But when you get up there and there isn't clouds and you can see the space, the other thing you got to realize is this is the morning and the sun is very bright coming at you from the other side. So if you see this like off to your left, off to the right is very bright from the sun. And I mean, it sounds like a duh, but kind of you don't think of that when you're thinking about going to the edge of space. You think it's going to be black and stuff, but you're doing it in the morning. The sun is very bright. You're in that cockpit. You kind of feel like you're, how you're sitting in a car on a real hot, sunny day and the sun's just beating you. That's kind of how you feel in this cockpit also. But just interesting because it's one of the things, maybe some of you had thought about it, but I hadn't thought about it, that when you're up there, the sun is also going to be very bright and beating on you. And the one side is dark, the one side is very bright. I think the other nice thing about doing it earlier in the day is your positioning that you still have. You can see the darkness to the one side. Now, something interesting about this, too, I was approached at my old job by a flat earther. And he said, oh, yeah. He says, I want to talk to you because I know about you going to the edge of space. He says, when you were up there, he says, you saw the space that the Earth was flat, right? I said, no, I saw that it was definitely, the Earth is definitely curved, I said. He says, oh, well, that's really just because of the curvature of the glass in the cockpit. It bends the light and makes it look curved when it's actually flat. So it was interesting to me because he had an excuse for even my observation personally, Didn't matter that when I was down on the ground, nothing was curved. But the minute I got up there, all of a sudden, those windows just started curving things. So that was fascinating to me. So back to the trip, it was very interesting. Wasn't up that high for that long. It's basically the kind of trip where you go up, you see it, you come back down, you get to play on the flight, which was very nice. It was a nice experience. Some days I think to myself, I'm not sure if I would do it again, or maybe I would. I don't know what the flights are like. I like to not experience the 7.8 Gs again. A friend of mine's son flies, and he says that, I think it was 9.2 did him in one time. Made him very sick and puking. So something you have to get used to. I think some people naturally are better at dealing with it. And I think that's some of the people that make the great pilots. So we did some trick flying on the way up. Went up, came back down, did some more trick flying. It was fun to get to fly it a little bit. It's a very powerful, interesting thing. Just zipping along, and you see the ground way down below you, a lot different than the being in a regular airplane and stuff, and a lot faster than a regular jet. But now, here's something I'd like to show you, something to pay attention to here. Look at my face there and see how nice the coloring of my skin is on that. Now here, after we've come down, there I am getting out. You can definitely look at the coloring of my skin, and I'd say I've become a little green since the 7.8 Gs. I was not feeling the best. That's the one thing I could say about that. Now, they did tell me, though, in advance, though, that some people after the flight would not fly back to Moscow. They preferred to take the train again. They did not want to be in any more jets. I have to admit, I did go back to my room, took a 3-hour nap, and I did take the jet back. So I did take the jet back, although my plans for after the flight originally were to go have some Husky vodka at the bar, which turned into a 3-hour nap instead because I did not feel good. But you can definitely tell the difference there between my skin on that picture and my skin tone on this picture. Plus, I don't think I have that grin on this one. So after the flight, then, of course, this gentleman here was my pilot. He seemed very knowledgeable, and he was a character. He would check with me back when I was flying to make sure that I was still with it when I was quiet for a while every so often. Because sometimes you're just being in awe of the whole thing. And I do agree, uh, Bill Shatner gave that speech about how amazing it is when you can see the Earth from down there, and it does give you a different perspective. It also makes you realize how thin our atmosphere really is, and that it really isn't that thick. I mean, we think of it as being thick, but it makes you realize that the Earth is fragile, and that we should try and take care of it. But so I have that picture of me and the pilot. Another one of him talking to me, and you can see my coloring is still quite green, shall we say. I kind of look like Frankenstein in that picture. And that's exactly how I felt. I was I'm sure we all had those days where you're feeling very bad, but you're pretending like you're feeling okay. And that's exactly where I was in that picture. Let's pretend like we're doing okay, although we'd like to just curl up somewhere. But that was from the G's. And that's what I have for the slides. On my return, of course, like I said, we went back, and then I did have more days in Moscow to enjoy. The flight was quite nice. I would gladly, probably, depending on the technology, do it again, maybe higher. I know that 22 kilometers isn't exactly what they call it. Doesn't break the 50, I think, kilometers it is that is the actual distance that you're supposed to be at, to call being in space. But I mean, being able to see a curvature of the Earth like that is amazing to me. So that's why they call it near edge of space. It's very nice, and it does make you feel in awe of the planet and in space itself. So that's a lot of the stuff I have to just say, but I can talk about all kinds of questions if somebody wants to talk to me about things. It's kind of been me rambling.
All right. Well, thank you very much, John, for sharing your story. It certainly was a quite fascinating experience to have gone through, and I think we enjoyed the little asides about the flat earther. For instance, John H. says that this just shows us how inventive the human mind can be when it wants to believe something. So this flat earther found any sort of explanation he could latch on to still confirm his prior idea. Now, Mike Lazine has an interesting question. He discusses your observation that in order to make spaceflight more commonplace, for a lot of people to tolerate it, one has to reduce the sensation of G's. And he also says there's the issue of gravity. Will we ever pull off artificial gravity or use magnetic boots that are seen in a number of sci-fi shows or movies? And John H. contributes to this conversation. He says, it may end up being easier to modify our bodies in order to mimic the beneficial effects of gravity than to create artificial gravity, or so that we wouldn't need gravity anymore. So this is a transhumanist connection to this discussion. What do you think, John, on this question of overcoming some of the perhaps less than pleasant effects of the G-forces or the Earth's gravity on the human body? How could we best do that in the future to make spaceflight more accessible?
Well, I know, like when I talked to people who explore Mars, they had talked about, once you get out of if you're not accelerating, you don't feel the G's. So once you get past the point of acceleration, but during the acceleration, they talked about the way they were going to see different playing with the seating of people and the directions and stuff. And I did notice in the Blue Origin vehicle that they're kind of like semi-laying down, not like sitting in a seat that you're getting pushed forward. I don't know what effect that has, along with the pressurized cabin. I'm thinking that might have some effect. I think the positioning of where you are and the pressurized cabin might have a different effect. I'm sure they're playing with it and trying to make it better. But I have to admit, if Jeff and them only felt 5.5 to 6 G's, I myself can say that's not really that bad. Like I said, it was when we got to 7.8 that I had a problem. I felt the G's at the other ones, but it was manageable. So I think the point is just to be able to make the G's more manageable. My other concept of that might be the flight pattern. I'm not sure if maybe instead of having more of a direct straight flight up, where you're feeling more G's, maybe it can be more of an angled flight out, where you're not ascending as fast, but you're kind of a longer trip, so that you don't have to accelerate as fast. That's the other question I've had. Maybe they could do that. Now, as far as the gravity in space, what I have seen a lot of times them doing more and more on shows, which I think is interesting and is probably more practical, they seem to be using the concept, like I said about the magnetic boots, but also mixing that with the rotation of parts of the ships, where you would get a form of man-made gravity from the motion. And it seems like today they seem to be using more of a combination of the two, of the magnetic boots and the rotation, so that you would have gravity at times from, the boots would keep you in place for normal activity, but in other places they would have some man-made gravity or the sensation of gravity from centrifugal force. So I think in the future they'll work on that. And I think it'll be probably some of both, where people will probably become more used to it and probably find a mixture where people can adapt. Like I said, 5.5 to 6 G's was not that bad. Although I think if you're going to have a lot of people going out, they're going to want that to be a little better.
Yes, indeed. And it was very interesting watching the video of your flight, at least the excerpts that you were allowed to post. And this video is linked here for others who want to see it. After the flight, the pilot was kind of teasing you, saying essentially you managed most of the flight just fine, but you had this discomfort toward the end. And now we have the context for that toward the end, they put you through 7.8 Gs.
Yeah, I kind of think that they did that on purpose. And somebody said that to me too, that they probably wanted to harass the American. I made it fine with the 5.5 and maybe 6 at times, but they knew I wasn't going to make it to 7.8.
Well, we all have our limits as humans without augmenting our biology. And yet Luis Arroyo expresses this sentiment, and I completely agree with him. Civilian-based space travel and exploration would definitely be the way to go. And hopefully within all of our lifetimes, within all of our hopefully indefinite lifetimes, we would be able to experience space travel as a service, the way we experience passenger air travel as a service. And if you think about it, when the Wright brothers went to space, when the Wright brothers first went into the air through powered flight, a lot of people saw this as just absolutely unprecedented. Even as late as 1903, some of the leading experts in the field were saying, no, it's impossible. Only in the course of many millennia will human beings ever get up into the skies. And yet the Wright brothers did it. And within just a few decades, passenger air flight was fairly common. It wasn't universally accessible, but a lot of the people who were alive when the Wright brothers made their first flight became airline passengers, and it wasn't seen as anything remarkable by the time they did it. So what do you think would need to happen in order for civilian-based space travel and exploration to become that commonplace?
Well, I think them just offering more kinds. I think it's great right now that we have 3 different companies that are on the verge of sending people up more often. I think it's good. We have SpaceX, we have the Virgin, we have the one by the Blue Origin, and I think just having more companies that they're competing is going to make them, make it more available and come up with new ideas. I was thinking when we were talking too that there was always the idea of the space elevator, which that's where they have a location down on Earth and they have another one up in the atmosphere. And basically, you take an elevator up to the high atmosphere, and then from there, you take a ship somewhere else. That might alleviate some of the worries about G's and everything for people, because you're just going up in an elevator basically, and that can be controlled. That's an interesting idea. I know they have a model of that. If anybody's been to Huntsville in Alabama, they have a little model description of a space elevator in the museum there for an idea for travel. So different things like that. And the competition, I think the competition is always good. I think the competition between the three companies is going to push it. They're going to want to, each company is going to want to up the other one. Look at Virgin Mobile Virgin sent theirs up right before Jeff sent his up and sent Captain Kirk up. I actually think them doing the famous people, I hate to admit it, so that seems quirky that they're doing that, but it's good publicity. It makes people watch. I felt I had said to some of you before how, when I came back, I was surprised. My trip was only covered by 2 small newspapers and 1 small TV station. The bigger newspapers and the bigger TV stations didn't care. They considered it kind of a feel-good story, and it didn't really make the news big. And I said, well, maybe if I had come down and shot somebody, or somebody had shot me, then they would have cared about it. It's like, so what the point I'm getting to with that is, sending famous people up into space and letting famous people go up. I hate to say it, but it gets people interested. And I think getting people interested is good. And it's going to push people's interest in wanting to do it also. It seems like a corny thing to do, but in this day and age where people are so into social media and stuff like that, it's a good thing. And I'm glad they're doing it. Although you'd wish they weren't. That's like some of the things with the space program, like Trump pushing our Space Force. I'm well aware a lot of that is, of course, probably military backed. You want people, in space to be able to watch the planet, to watch the other countries, to watch the other militaries. And although I'd wish that we were pushing the space program for scientific reasons and for exploration, I'm happy it's being pushed for any reason, even if it is for military reason. If it's getting us up there, I'm all for it. Of course, I wish it was not. Like I said, I wish it was for scientific reasons. But I'm also a big promoter. People have asked before, why spend money on the space program? Why not spend money on other things? And I think people don't realize, though, that there's a lot of research and there's a lot of side things that come out of the space program that help with other issues. And I even think of this for longevity of the human race. I think when they're working on what enables people to live in space for a long time, what enables people to deal with the G's and deals with the effects of being on other planets and their circulation and making sure the brain gets the right blood and the right nutrients when G's are changing and gravity is changing. And I think that the technology that's going to come with that is going to help us in other areas and might help us even in longevity because of them making sure that man can survive in other atmosphere, or not necessarily atmospheres, but other conditions that we weren't originally made to survive in. I think that research in itself is going to have a lot of side things that it affects. There's going to be a lot of other technologies that are going to come out of it that we can't even think of. You think of things that happen from the space program. I'm looking for more Tang is what I'm really looking for. But I'm out of Tang right now, actually. I just ran out. But so that's kind of some of my thoughts on that. I'm looking. I think there's a lot that can come out of the push space program. Otherwise, I know I kind of went on a side trip there. Sorry about that. So,
well, thank you, John. That was a great answer, and I would also like to thank Kimberly Forsyth, New World Optimist, for her generous contribution. She says, "Thank you." Well, thank you, Kimberly, for being with us today and for your continued support of our endeavors. And thank you also to John H. for his generous contribution. And John H. also contributes to this discussion. He writes, there are some interesting programs about attempts to engineer a space elevator on YouTube. So this is definitely an area of interest. And Edward, I know you have a book here, so if you could show it again to our audience and perhaps offer some remarks about this.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thanks, John. This is a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. I had a book I came out with in 2002, Space, the Free Market Frontier, and we did things on Capitol Hill to kind of, tell people that space is a place, not just a government program. And there's people, it turned out to be Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all, who might be able to actually do something, which they have. But I wanted to hold this up because this book is about 20 years old, but what's interesting is it was done by a couple of folks contracting with NASA, looking at both the technical and the economic issues involved with the space elevator. And they were very good, basically saying it can't just be technical, it has to actually make economic sense. They were quite open about the technical issues. And after 20 years, some of those technical issues that they talk about in the book have been resolved. And I was thinking of contacting them again and saying, well, it's on the 20th anniversary of your book. What is the status of the space elevator? I know that the Japanese have been looking at one. There's a Japanese company you probably know about that are looking at a space elevator as well. The big problem is getting the nanotech material to hold together. One of the technical issues is it's like a zipper. If one little thing comes off of your zipper, the whole zipper comes undone. And that's kind of been the technical problem with, but the materials, the strength of the material now is here. So again, it's interesting. This is something to keep an eye on, because while I love what Musk, Bezos, Branson et al. Are doing, it might well be in the next 20 years, 15 or 20 years, well, space flight, and using a chemical rocket to go up is no longer necessary because we are building some kind of an elevator. So just as a point of information, I'll make one other comment, by the way. Buzz Aldrin, who just turned 92, by the way, yay Buzz, has a chapter in the book about a space cycler. And what he talks about is the idea of using the moon and the Earth's gravity to shoot a spaceship out that kind of goes out to the moon. It goes out and it kind of slows down, and then it kind of stops, and then it comes back and swings back and goes to the Earth. The Earth's gravity kind of slows it down and stops, and then it goes back and forth like that. And all you have to do if you want to hitch a ride to the moon or from the moon back to the Earth is you kind of go out, you sit, with your rocket, your chemical rocket, sit there, meet the thing, get on, and there you go, putting supplies that way too. So there's just so much interesting innovation, and I'm really glad to hear that you got to experience one of the first efforts even before Elon and Bezos had their thing going. So again, thanks for the presentation. By the way, I was in Russia in 81, 89, 90 something or other. So I've sort of seen some of the same things that you were talking about. It brings back some memories.
Yes, indeed. So now let us go to David Shoemaker for his comments or questions.
Hey, John, really good to hear about this. The curvature of space, you talked about that a little bit. I loved that picture. Other people that I've read about that have seen the curvature of space said that they found it to fundamentally change them in some way, big or small. You mentioned how thin the atmosphere was. Can you talk a little bit about the feelings, what that was like to see that?
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. I myself, I was caught up in wanting it to be to make it through. I have to admit, I think some of it was I had some fear of the trip in me. Also, I tell you, I have to admit there was a little bit of claustrophobic of being locked in there, and a little bit of feeling odd with the G's and stuff. I did find that whole part, at that point though. What you could call it almost out of body without it being out of body. You had that feeling where you're floating above everything. So it is kind of a spiritual feeling. At the same time, I was caught up in the fact that, you know, I wanted to make sure that I got back down to earth, you know. So I think some of that took away from what I could have had. I think maybe if I did do it again, I would have more time to reflect on it, and you know, not have the strangest feelings of wanting to make sure everything was okay. You know, I'll have to admit the fact that I know that I was on an aircraft that had just needed to be repaired also probably made me feel good and queasy all at the same time. But it's very beautiful up there, and I think you know, my biggest surprise was, like I'll say again, is about how bright the sun is. And you think about being up there, and you think of the black of space and darkness of space, but you forget that once you get out of the atmosphere, you're not really as protected from the sun either. So to one side of me, it was very bright, and to the other side, you could see the blackness of space, and the contrast in itself was very shocking and interesting, and something I hadn't thought about. I mean, now when I come back and I think about it, of course, duh, you should know that one side's going to be very bright from the sun, you know, because the sun is up. But I think that was very amazing to see the sunlight like that. Not only seeing, you know, but things look clearer too. Like the stars even seem different. Seeing them in the blackest space, the stars you could see than seeing them through the atmosphere. They didn't have that twinkle effect, you know, they just seemed to be there. So that was kind of interesting also. But yeah, I could call it, I could see if I had had more time to actually dwell on it when I was there. I don't think I had the time to dwell on it with the length of this trip. I think if I could have been there longer, would have had more time to dwell on it. But I was happy to be able to get through it and get back on the earth. So I have to admit, some of that was going through my mind. So with some things you do in life, I have to admit, you're happy to be able to get it done. You know, I have to admit, like when some of you know, I also hiked to the base camp of Mount Everest, and you know, the oxygen gets thin there and stuff. And with that also, it's you like the experience, but you like being able to know that you got through it, that you got back down to where you can breathe normally and everything's nice. So yeah, it's quite an experience. It would be nice, like I said, that, you know, I kind of would like to, you know, be in, you know, it would be interesting to be in like a shuttle type thing where you're just up there and you go around and maybe do a couple. It would be kind of neat to do a couple orbits of the Earth and be able to kind of enjoy that and maybe ponder it and experience it longer. I think that would be very nice. I don't know if that really answered the question.
Oh, I think it did, especially when you mentioned the spiritual aspect to it, because the photograph is quite amazing. Anytime I see the curvature of the Earth, I'm impressed. But I only have to imagine, since I haven't actually experienced it, that probably the actual experience of seeing it firsthand is probably far greater. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. It is amazing, and it is far greater than you think. Like I said, I just wish I'd had more time to ponder it. It was actually quite a quick trip, but then again, you're going in 1977 technology, which they still make, and sell to other places. So you know, it would be nice to do that in something different, where you have more time. But it's very beautiful too. It is beautiful to see the Earth like that. I mean, anytime you take a long trip and you're high up in an airplane or a jet, and you look down and you think of how beautiful the clouds are and the Earth is. But this is like, you see even more this way, which is just amazing. You know, you don't just see pieces of land, you see like continents, you know, so that's kind of interesting.
Yes, indeed. Now let us go to Tom Ross. Tom, please proceed with your observation.
Yeah, John, I think it's great that you purchased an experience, you know, rather than a boat or whatever you're talking about, and that you enjoyed the fear in a way. And you know, astronaut Edgar Mitchell talked about his experience of samadhi, of having, where he had a similar experience to you, but maybe he had more time in there to have a broader experience. and really created a whole the Noetic Sciences Institute of Noetic Sciences out of that experience. But I think probably the burning question I have, and probably everybody watching has, is, did you get to keep the suit?
No, I did not. But
Okay.
that is kind of one of the reasons I have looked, and they do sell the pressure suits on eBay, a matter of fact, which is interesting because I did think about that idea.
How long?
They kind of had a hard time fitting me for one too, because they said they don't, because of me being a little larger.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it's the suit in itself, though, to tell you the truth, when they got it on and got one that fit me and they put it on me, it was a little scary in itself because it did look like 1950s technology.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, this is, is this really going to protect me? But it's, I always had to laugh. I went up in a Meg 29, which really is, like I said, 1977 technology. I wore a suit that looked like 1950. And it kind of reminds me of that old story, which I know isn't true. It's just a story they made up about the Americans spending a couple billion on making a pen that could write in space, and the Russians just using a pencil.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Right.
it worked. I
Yep.
mean, I have to admit it worked. It got me there, So to some extent, when we talk about the new space stuff that they did, when we talk about Virgin and we talk about Blue Origin, and it's like, I'm not as impressed. I'm glad that they're doing it for maybe making passengers doing it, more people available, and making it reusable.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting to me that technology from 1977 could get you to the edge of space. And I know that I don't think they've built it yet, but the Russians keep talking about building a MiG 41. And I think the 41 is supposed to be able to go higher and to be able to maybe even orbit, but they haven't built it yet. So I mean, they have some new technology based off of old technology, which I'm sure probably is not as not as advanced as you think it would be.
Yeah.
I was surprised with stories of the space shuttle, and I know that like NASA would be going to these old computer sales and buying 256 processors. And because they use those in the space shuttle, people said how horrible the space shuttle is using processors that are so old.
Mm-hmm.
But they said, well, you don't realize about those processors, the old ones, were very thick and were actually well shielded from any of the radiations that would be experienced.
Mm.
So
that'd be the other question. Yeah.
Right. So although the processors were better and quicker, they didn't handle as well with the radiations and stuff that's going to happen. So,
yeah, I was thinking when you were talking about the ancillary research that comes out of these things, like with the Apollo, we got a lot of research and inventions that came out of that helped people, and even things like Starlink right now is helping people in general in underdeveloped countries and this type of thing. And it seems like there should be a PR campaign to that identifies the to justify the investment in these programs, that identifies the types of inventions or research that can come out that can help either developing countries or just lay people in general. It seems like it'd be a smart thing to do to justify this investment. We know ultimately it's a very small part of the overall budget, but most of it has gone to the military. But I just think that would be a smart thing to do.
Well, it's interesting you said I joke about Tang, but you think of when they're trying to figure out how to feed people that live on the moon, and you feed people especially that go to Mars, what technology you might look into and what hybrid plants and stuff they might look into might be beneficial for third world countries that need to grow food and grow fast growing food in small areas or in bad climates and bad soil. This is very much research that could carry over to help third world countries that people don't think of. So when I joke about Tang, there's other things that really relate to that, although I do love joking about Tang, and I miss the grape Tang. They don't have the grape Tang anymore. But and people don't think about that. We get so caught up in things, and I know people don't like genetically altered plants, and oh my God. But people forget that throughout history, we've been altering plants and our livestock. We just have been doing it in different ways. A lot of the plants we eat today didn't look anything like they look today.
Yeah.
But we had people that bred and inbred and kept, changing the strains and doing it the old-fashioned way. So we've been playing with the genetics of our plants and our livestock for a long time, and just in different manners than we do today. So people don't think of that.
For me, that's one of the best arguments for transhumanism, in that we are transhuman anyway. If you're wearing glasses or you use a Post-it note, you are extending your capabilities in some way. So it just, now we've kind of put a framework around what transhumanism is, but we have been transhuman all along because we are our technology and our tools. But it's a great presentation. I really envy that you had that experience, and I hope you get to do it again and feel some more of that samadhi.
Interesting you said that about the transhuman things, because before I had gone on the trip, I think it was maybe a year before, I think was the less than a year before, actually, I had my last retina surgery in my left eye. But I've had 3 retina surgeries and 2 cataract surgeries where I've been implanting lenses in my eyes. So both my eyes have been altered, and I went up with, after having 5 operations. And it's funny because my eye doctor, I asked him after the last retina surgery, I said, "Are my eyes okay if I ever decide to fly to space?" He said, "Sure, they'd be fine." So I come back after the trip and I bring the newspaper article and give him a copy, and he's like, "Oh." I said, "Well, you told me they'd be fine." He said, "Well, I guess they were." So he told me they'd be fine. Actually, not. I think he probably said, "This guy will never go to space, so why would he say that?"
Yeah.
But he told me it would be fine. So it did make it. So it's interesting that was kind of funny. I made it with my alterations.
Yeah, good. Cyborg in space.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, I am quite glad that your doctor ended up being correct, perhaps inadvertently, but nonetheless. So we have a compliment for you from Bakwan Group, who says that you're one of their favorite guests. Thank you very much. And John H. also observes that technology from 1969 got us to the moon. So perhaps right now, the current, still somewhat limited situation with regard to human space travel is not so much an issue of technological limitations. It's more an issue of funding and will, particularly political will. But it does seem that there are hopeful signs of politicians making spaceflight more of a priority, and entrepreneurs as well, which John mentioned. So competition within the private sector, I think, could greatly improve our chances of not just reaching the moon again, but settling the moon and then settling Mars. So most definitely an area that the Transhumanist Party advocates. And in the meantime, we're happy to feature individuals who have the courage and have the will themselves to go to space the way that John did. Now I would like to see if Art Ramon has any questions or comments.
Yeah, I have an idea as far as trying to make space elevators economical. It would be sort of to get the concept of an offshore oil rig and a factory. So you would put this factory up in orbit, and then you would go out and capture a small asteroid, and then have that 3D print like drill pipe. So then you would lower that drill pipe, down to the surface, where then you can have that asteroid. You could pulverize part of it and send it down through the drill pipe, while simultaneously you could continue printing out drill pipe and harvest that drill pipe at the bottom. So that would be a way to start kind of getting the concept of lowering things from orbit all the way down to the surface. And eventually you could probably add on components that you could put on the drill pipe and then send it back up. So that would get the whole concept of the whole concept of how you do drill pipe for oil drilling, and space mining and having 3D printing out in space and in orbit. So that's one idea that I had at one time, and I throw it out there for anyone to improve on it. Another idea is like early in The Expanse, like in the first few seasons, when they were hitting hard acceleration, they would actually inject themselves with a fluid, and that would help them deal with the high G. And that was only like, I think the first few seasons where they did that. They kind of dropped it off. But yeah, it's some way of helping the body tolerate high G by injecting yourself with a fluid. It's probably something that should be expanded on. Probably just going straight up, you don't have that problem because you are in that laid back position. You're not doing barrel rolls or banking or any crazy hammer maneuvers. But the idea that The Expanse presented, I thought was interesting. That could be expanded on.
Yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
I do also watch The Expanse, and I do like a lot of the stuff there. And just touching base on some other things that was said before when we talked about the elevator and stuff. I have met Buzz working with Explore Mars. He actually can be quite a character. But I used to go out with another group, Alliance for Space Development, to down to DC and to try and push some programs. And there are policies that are out there that are trying to get voted on that would surprise you. You talk about, Expanse and the Belters and the people at the asteroid belt that are mining for minerals and stuff and supplying the inners with it back to the planets, Earth, Moon, and Mars. And, that's very much be surprised that is being looked at today. And three of the things that we would go out with that group and talk to them on Capitol Hill about, one of them was policies on trade for when they do get that far. And it's on the books now with bills that are talking about the trade policies and stuff. I mean, the government is looking at already what the rights are going to be and what the trades are going to be. And also about other incentives for businesses in space that already is being looked at. And another thing there were three things. Those are the three things about the asteroid belt's rights, business incentives in space. The third thing we were looking at when we're going out with them was talking about a bill on the books that was about a satellite that was actually going to be put between Mercury and Venus, or in Venus's orbit, just not right at the planet, of course. Supposedly, the reason for this satellite is to watch for any oncoming meteors or comets that could hurt the Earth or interfere with our planet. My suspicion on that is the fact that might have to do with also military reasons. That might actually be on the book for military reasons. But it's interesting, though, that's interested me in The Expanse that they talk about. They do have the people that are the Belters, and they're working on the asteroid belt, and that is things that they're looking forward to. And I'm looking forward to as in they're already looking ahead to that possibility. And same thing with I saw somebody said something about manufacturing services. The thing is, once you get out to space, hopefully we're not depleting things on our planet to build things. Like when you're on the moon, you're building buildings on the moon out of materials on the moon, making concrete from the moon dust and from the moon soil. And then when you're getting further out, even on Mars, you're building things from the materials there. You're not hauling a lot of materials, and hopefully you're gaining the ability to make fuels and stuff already further out that you wouldn't be. And I think that's an important thing to being able to move forward, is not to be always sending things from Earth, but being developed that the materials you need for construction and for exploration and for fuels can be made on the other locations where you're at. And yes, like you said about the injecting them for the G's, that's an interesting technology right there. That could be something that could be, who knows if there's something that could be used to enable them to deal with the G's. That could be something maybe that could help stroke victims, or because they did take it to try and prevent them from having strokes, which was one of the causes of the problems they were having on the show with people with G's. But that could be something that could help people on this this planet with stroke. So I actually recovered from a stroke last March. I had where I lost my left side. Which my left side? That's my left side. So so that's a near and dear thing to me. So those are some of my thoughts on what Art said.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, John. And Edward Hudgens pointed out this is the comment that you were responding to, that making space manufacturing and services tax-free is one proposal that could encourage space development. And indeed, it makes sense to incentivize construction in space. And as you pointed out, John, building from materials that are already available on other worlds like the moon could also be encouraged by such a policy. We have a generous super chat from Alan Crowley, who says, thanks for another great salon with another great guest. Thank you, Alan, for watching and for your contribution. And now I would like to ask Jason Geringer if he has any observations.
I'm fascinated by the how we are just like not physically, space is dangerous place. I didn't raise my hand when you said who wants to go, because it's pretty freaky, and I really don't have any real good idea how we could change genetically our bodies to be able to be more adaptable to space. And I'm this idea of G's and the problem of how we're gonna handle that is one of the big things I think about all the time. And I'm just wondering, do you think we'll be the answer to that question is more in developing a technology that allows us to just go there and like your suit and all that? Or do you think in the future we will get farther by genetically altering us so we are more able to handle that kind of situation, that environment? Or do you think it'll just be like maybe a combination of both? That's it. Back to you.
Yeah, I think probably a combination of both. But at first, I think humans as we are, I think we will try and alter the environment as much to suit us. I think that's sort of I hate to say it, but that's sort of, I think, how we do things. But I think the environment might also alter us. If you're born and you live on another planet with a different gravity for a long time, it's going to change you. And I hate to bring up The Expanse again, because I do think that's a good show, but Art brought it up, so I guess we can. He busted that out, so I guess I can use that as an example, though. But they had that problem with people that have lived on, either been out in space for all the time. When they come to planets, they can't deal with it, or on another planet, you live on the moon your whole life, and then you go to Mars and Earth, and it bothers you more. So I think I think we're going to alter slightly. I think it's just going to be, but I think being as humans as we are, I think we're going to try and form things to us. I mean, even when we live in very hot areas, and of course we get air conditioning when we use our air conditioning all the time. I'm sure Dave uses air conditioning a lot out there in Phoenix, and so I think we will alter it as much as we can to fit us. But I think there probably will be some changes that do happen. I mean, even on this planet, people that live at high altitudes, their blood is usually a little thicker and they carry more oxygen, and it changes. That's why athletes sometimes will train in the high altitudes to kind of artificially dope, like blood doping. Their blood changes, so you carry more oxygen when you come down to lower altitudes.
Yeah.
So
it makes me wonder if in the future we'll train our soldiers on like a planet that has high gravity, and then they end up all huge and stocky and just we train Hulk dudes on I wonder if the higher gravity will have like an effect. Maybe we can just be end up with superhumans just by growing up on a big planet.
Well, if anybody ever read the original reason for why Superman had strength, it wasn't anything to do with a yellow sun or a red sun. It was the fact he was on a larger planet and they had a higher gravity, and that made him denser. And originally he didn't fly; he leaped, and his skin was denser and he was more strong. So that originally was the reason for Superman being stronger. Later on, they did the yellow sun and his cells absorbing it. And even if you watch Guardians of the Galaxy, the original versions of Guardians of the Galaxy, not the movie versions, they had a Charlie, I forget, was he Charlie 7, who was from Jupiter or Saturn or whatever. And because of him coming from a large planet, he was very thick and dense and very strong also. So, that has been some theories I've had. But I think past the point, though, I think somehow it would take a while for us to develop to be able to live on planets like that. That would be, those gravities would just be crushing, But it might be when they want to train Moon and Mars soldiers, they might want to train them on Earth, because of Earth having the greater gravity. Earth might be, to be honest, Earth might be like, what was that, John Carter on Mars, where he went to Mars through a tunnel he found, and he was very strong on Mars because he was from Earth. So this might be funny, but this might be the planet where they train. So
I think Mike Lazine brought up a good point, which might be the third option, which would be to use replicants or an AI that goes out, and we have a virtual reality experience here, controlling those things, and I think it would obviously make it a lot safer for human beings, but to have a virtual reality where you're experiencing everything this AI robot is experiencing with tactile and all the sensors, and and to experience even some G's maybe, but just to send out a virtual AI to experience this thing and having the experience but safe on Earth might be one way to go.
Yeah, I think there's a big future for that, because our brains are very good at, how do you say, not feeling like we're a head in a jar. Like there's that experiment where they have somebody see through a camera and it's looking down, and what they see is like doll's legs, and then they touch their toe at the same time as they're touching the doll's toe, and after a while our brains tend to just, like, it seems real to us, and so I think that technology has a big future. I think our brains are able to take to it very well, so I can't wait for that.
Keep the insurance rates down.
I do think human beings are naturally explorers, though, and I like virtual things, but it just isn't the same. Virtual meetings aren't the same. Going to someplace virtually isn't the same. I think you're still going to have, just by human nature, people that want to explore, want to be there physically. I think we are kind of crazy sadomasochistic beings, and I think we're going to want to do it, even if we're not going to necessarily want to do it the safest way. How often do all of us do things in the safest way? I'm sure we all do some things that somebody else would say, "Why'd you do that?"
All the joys.
I still think man's going to want to go out and do it in person, even if they could do it virtually. I don't think it's going to be the same. It's like a lot of these meetings I was mentioning, Explore Mars. The past couple of years, Explore Mars stuff has been virtual, and it's not the same as getting out in DC and talking to the officials and talking to people from NASA in person and stuff. And it's just, I love these salons and stuff and dealing with everybody like this, but if you have the opportunity, I'd like to see us, the Transhumanist Party, have conferences where everybody gets together. I think
micro gestures and the micro expressions. There's a lot of quality that comes in when you're with somebody personally.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could, if somebody could experience that samadhi or that moment that you had through a virtual experience, and if that, because that would probably be the touchstone to, whether this is a valuable technology.
Mike Lazine points out that virtual experiences are not the same but they can be an option for those who are risk averse or might not be able to afford the physical experiences. And of course, we know travel is costly, and space travel in particular is costly these days. Indeed, our friend Daniel Twett wonders if you care to disclose this. What was the price of the 22-kilometer MiG-29 flight to space?
I like to say it was the price of a car. So that's what I kind of like to say without giving too much away. I could have bought a new car for the price of going to space. So that's why I said kid before about buying a car, buying a boat. You know, okay, I'll give a price. It was about 30,000. It cost me, but I thought it was well worth it. The MiG-22, the MiG-29, sorry, was a lot better cost effective than what they're charging for the Virgin and the Blue Origin flights. And of course, I would hope that with that cost goes a lot more safety. I have to admit, I think the reason you go to Russia and you fly in a MiG-29 and you don't do that in the United States in one of our fighter jets is because in this country they're afraid something happens, they might sue you, where I don't think the Russians care.
Yeah, so it's interesting to observe the differences in attitudes toward risk, and I have a bit of familiarity with those attitudes from that part of the world, having been born there myself. But 30,000 is not bad at all, especially for 2014, and especially when compared to the prices that people who essentially either have to be millionaires or have to be invited on the Virgin flights or the Blue Origin flights were paying. So 30,000 versus at the very least hundreds of thousands of dollars for those flights. I wouldn't be surprised if the cost for those flights was in the six figures, but a lot of people could afford $30,000 flights to space. Indeed, I'm surprised that more people do not regularly partake in those kinds of flights. So maybe
So you want me to send you the information because you're off tomorrow, right?
Maybe if they included the suit.
Well, there you go. That maybe I'm sure for a certain amount they probably would, but I have to admit that what I find is traveling is, the American dollar, even though sometimes people, scoff at our country, is very much wanted when you go places. And it can get you very far. I mean, when I was in Egypt, they wanted American money. They didn't want their own money. They wanted you to pay them in American money if you could. But talking about the cost of things, when I was in Tibet for the tour to the base camp Mount Everest, I was in Tibet for a week and a half, and that whole food and shelter and the hotels and the tour and getting there and coming back, minus the flight, was under $1,000 in Tibet. And you couldn't, that would be maybe 2 days here in this country. You know what I mean? So your money can go further into the countries, even in a bigger country like Russia. Your money can go a lot further. So that's something to keep over traveling. I have found a lot of times in my travels that the flight, the actual flight to get there, is the most expensive thing on your bill. Going on my way to Russia, I stopped in Rome, which was very nice. So I got to pray at the Vatican first. It doesn't matter if you believe or not. It can't hurt. It can't, can only help. But it's the flight that's more expensive. When you're in the other countries, your money goes further, and that's something to keep in mind. That's nice, but the flights are still pretty expensive.
Yes, absolutely. Now these days, the flights could cost four figures easily, but it's true, the cost of living is a lot lower in the former Soviet countries. Of course, for someone like me, I have to be worried about being branded a dissident or a draft dodger. And as a result, it would be more difficult for me to show up there. However, one could live easily for a couple of years on $30,000 in those countries if one has expenses typical for people who reside there. Of course, the salaries there are correspondingly lower, so that seems like a lot of money. But most certainly the cost of food, the cost of shelter, unless you're living in like downtown Moscow, is a lot lower. So now I'm curious if Ben Ballweg has any questions or comments.
Oh man, I almost needed a second pair of underwear because I was dying to share this part that I'm coming to right now. So I know that everybody on this call has seen Transcendent Man with Ray Kurzweil. And in that movie documentary, he was shown in the zero G scenes and like spinning around in the plane with a bunch of other people and stuff like that. So that one really excites me, and I have priced that out at about $5,000 to have that experience. I also recommend a video by OK Go that is done all in zero G as well. It's pretty cool. I think one other thing that I heard about that experience was someone was talking about sleeping at zero G, and they described the experience as quote unquote delicious. It's like, man, someday I'm going to have the zero G experience. So I guess, John, what I was curious to hear about from you was what has drawn you to space? What makes you most interested in space? I don't know if I quite had this myself growing up, that I was like, man, someday I'm going to get to space come hell or high water. I'm kind of curious about the $5,000 to get up and experience zero G. I'm looking forward to that. And I think I'll manage that, unless, barring, how would we say, like if we get to space in a fast enough time, I hope to get to space myself. And but I guess I'm like, well, I'm hoping for the life extension first, and then get to space in due time, I suppose. But what made you want to go to space? From, I presume, your upbringing, what got you excited from an early age?
Like I said, probably Lost in Space was the first show. I think that was a silly show looking back now, but back when I was a kid, I liked that. And of course, the original Star Trek, loved that. As a kid, I was always trying to build my own spaceships and Mach spaceships. And of course, when you're a kid, you take, there was a factory down the street that had the big wooden boxes from the factory parts. And me and my friends would steal them. I mean, they're huge, like coffin-sized boxes. And we build forts, drag them blocks down the street into our yard and build forts out of them. And I'd build Mach spaceships out of them. Of course, when you're a kid, you figure if you build something that looks like a spaceship, it's going to, of course, take off and be able to get you in space. So I did that as a kid. It just was always a desire to be able to be in space. I loved the idea of exploring, and even to this day, going to the edge of space. But something I think that would be interesting. I've been to Egypt and been to the pyramids and stuff, but what I'm getting to is the Stargate TV series. If anybody watched that, you had the first one from the first movie, and then you had the Atlantis one, about that. But then you had that final show where they were kind of lost all the way out, and they had no way to get back. And, they were finding planets with dead races and archaeological buildings and stuff. And I thought, now that would be an interesting job, to be a space archaeologist, where you were exploring planets and finding ruins of civilizations on other planets that, that might have been years ago or something. That would be just so, it would be like the ultimate archaeologist thing, to be a space archaeologist. So even today, that's something to me, it's like, be amazing to be the ultimate archaeologist, not an archaeologist on Earth, but an archaeologist to other planets of civilizations that might have disappeared years ago. That to me just still has awe. I don't know, space always had awe to me. And it was instilled by those shows back in those days. My dad worked on airplanes in the Navy, which I always think is funny, but he worked on airplanes back then. So there was that in my past also. You had mentioned about the G's, and people ask me about what I experienced about the G's. And, I'm strapped in the cockpit. I really didn't feel that. But then I wonder, like I said, where you don't have the perception your perception of how high up you are and stuff kind of changes when you're up there, and you feel kind of different. And like I said, when we turned upside down and my gloves went up to the top, and I grabbed them, and looking back, I actually think some of my perception on where I was at was altered, because I think you do have a slight less effect on you doing that than you would further down on the earth and doing normal flight. So I think the gravity did affect me a little differently, although I was strapped in and couldn't notice it. But I think you do feel a change. You just don't necessarily perceive it as that at the time. So, I'd also looked into some of those flights and thought they might be interesting. But so those are some of my thoughts. That's some of what interests me. And still to this day, like I said, being a space archaeologist, that just seems like that would be a fascinating thing. Not only finding, civilizations on this planet that were never known, but civilizations on other planets that, ruins and stuff. That would just be fascinating,
Yes, I hope you do get to be a space archaeologist, John. That's a fascinating choice of career. And Mike Lazine shared an experience that echoes your own during your childhood. When he and his brother were kids, they built a large cardboard rocket ship that one could go inside. So a lot of people were fascinated by the concept of going to space and imagined themselves, at least at some point in their lives, with regard to doing that. Now, I was recently asked by an individual who was curious, what would I do with a greatly expanded lifespan? And I pointed out that one could have multiple careers. One didn't just have to have one if one had many centuries to look forward to. So he asked me, well, what would be essentially your next 3 careers if you were to have an indefinite lifespan? And I told him, well, I'm currently an actuary, but I only plan to be an actuary for 25 years total. If certain things go according to plan, I could retire from the actuarial profession when I'm 47. So my next career, assuming 25-year spans for careers, would be being a gentleman philosopher. And I'm kind of preparing to do that right now. What I'm doing as a hobby right now, hopefully will be my next career. And then 25 years pass, so I would be 72 at that point in time. I would like my 3rd career after that to be composer. So when I'm a gentleman philosopher, I'll do a bit more composition on the side. And then another 25 years pass, and I'm 97. And if everything goes according to plan, I said my 4th career would be space developer. Now, it wouldn't necessarily be going to the edge of human habitation at that point in time, because hopefully space travel will be a lot better established. So when I'm 97, it will be the year 2084. So in 2084, hopefully we'll have very convenient trips to the moon, to orbital bases, and maybe even to Mars. We'll have regular passenger flights to Mars, and it would be fascinating to consider what other structures could be built there. I might not even be building structures at the edge of human habitation, but perhaps some nice grand buildings on Mars. That would be fascinating. But John, I hope you get to be the space archaeologist at that point in time, and maybe we'll start having flights to other star systems. That would be quite fascinating. And we transhumanists, we are trying to reach a world where that would be possible, where I could be a space developer at age 97, and you will be in your 2nd century of life, John. So you can go roam the star systems and be a space archaeologist.
Yeah, I gotta look now. I hope there's a home study course for that somewhere. I'm gonna look on the computer when we're done tonight. I'll sign up. But a couple things I did like that. There was a French TV show. I forget the name of it. We had talked about this before in a meeting that we had, but where they talked about people living. They had found that something from one of the jellyfish enabled them to live for extended periods of times. And the oldest person, I think at the time, was 168. But in this program, they made it mandatory that you did have to change your profession after a certain age. You know, like the one guy that was a policeman, I think he was already like 119 or something, and they were mandating he already had been a policeman longer than he should have been, because they found for people to help them with their sanity, actually, and to enjoy living long, they had to change professions. It was good for them mentally, and also, you know, to live that long and to change what you did, and it kept life fresher. So that's interesting that you mentioned that, because they had mentioned that in the show as something that they actually made mandatory for people to still, you know, live long and enjoy your life, not get bored with what you're doing. It's interesting. Earlier you said the comment when I was coming out of Russia. My last name Kerecz is actually Hungarian, and actually I was questioned by one of the customs officers. Well, you have a Hungarian name, and you says you're American here, and it says, you know, and he kind of questioned me on that, and I just was kind of like, well, America's kind of made up of immigrants from all over, so I mean, it's not. I don't know of a name that's truly American. So even if you were white, if I was John Whitefeather, that's still, you know, it looks like the Indians migrated from the Mongolians and also had a heavy Viking influence too. So, I mean, it was interesting, though, how he questioned me on having a Hungarian name and being an American. So you're probably good you don't go back. Maybe wait until they give you the flights in this country.
Yes, indeed. Well, imagine the kind of questioning I would get for having a Russian name, and particularly for having quite vocally denounced the regime of Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus. So there are certain cases where American citizenship doesn't protect one, especially when one of those countries still thinks that one is still their citizen, even though I do not agree with that interpretation. But it is easier for American citizens, particularly American citizens with American or sufficiently American names, to visit the countries of the former Soviet Union. I would exclude the Baltic states from that description, because you could very easily go to Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. They won't give you any issues of that sort. But apart from that, I think it can be very difficult if one is seen as having a connection to that part of the world. But if one is seen as just being an American visitor who is there for tourism or to have a certain experience, apolitical, then I think it's quite doable. So thank you for that aspect of the conversation. And also, we have an interesting observation from our friend Daniel Twett, who writes, "We are all in space on Spaceship Earth, technically correct. We need to become better crew and better crew people. So we also need, I think, better captains, better pilots for our spaceship." So, John, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree, and that's what when I mentioned that about realizing how small and how thin the atmosphere really is, I think that's, I think Shatner mentioned that too, and it makes you realize how fragile it is. I think when you're down here on the surface, you just think the atmosphere is immense, and it really isn't. I mean, the distance is very short, and there really is not as much air and atmosphere as you think there is from your perspective of down the ground. And so, it is something that we should work on. I mean, you have the people that don't believe in global warming or climate change, and it's like, I'm not saying either way right here, but if we're going to watch the environment and make the earth a cleaner place and a better place, if there is no climate change, does it matter if we're making it a cleaner earth? I mean, just the fact that it's a cleaner earth and a healthier earth, I think, is a reward in itself, even if we're not worried about a climate change. So I don't think, that we have to have to be motivated by that. We should be motivated by the fact of keeping our planet clean and healthy, and therefore keeping us clean and healthy. So it's, it kind of reminds me of that idea is, sometimes people are afraid to do things because they want to go to heaven instead of hell. So you want to be good so you don't go to hell. But I think you should want to do good because you're doing good. And I think the same thing with our environment and taking care of our earth. I think we should want to take care of our earth because it's the right thing to do. I have my fears as far as when we reach out to space. My fear is that man will just be like a plague that just reaches out and destroys things as we go. I mean, I'm afraid we'll do that. I hope we won't. I hope that we will, reaching out into space might alleviate some of the strain we do on our own planet right now, when we can manufacture things on the moon and manufacture things on Mars, and we can maybe even manufacture things out in the belt and further out. I'm hoping that can alleviate the damage that we do to our planet, and we can equalize it out. But I hope that we're not like a evil swarm of locusts and just annihilate all the crops and everything as we go and just keep spreading out across the universe. I hope that's not what the human beings become. I hope we, take care of things because it's the right thing to do, and we want it to be there for our next generations, or for us if we live for a long time. So you have to think of it that way.
Yes, thank you, John. And your comments have sparked some great viewer engagement. I've been posting some of the viewer observations as you were speaking, but also your comments reminded me of a debate that I participated in recently on the last day of 2021, and David was there in attendance. It was hosted by Sharif Rana, our Director of Foreign Relations, also with the World Talent Economy Forum. And I was playing the role of the US Transhumanist Party in government in a parliamentary system, where I defended the resolution that essentially humans should explore space and settle other worlds. And I pointed out that exploring space could actually help us solve some of the issues, including the environmental issues on Earth, like climate change, not only because we would have this broader awareness, as you've discussed, of the fragility of our planet, but also because we could move a lot of the polluting activities to other worlds, build more factories on the moon or on Mars or on other planets, and perhaps relocate some of the heavier manufacturing over there. But also we would have a bit of a safety mechanism, so to speak, if not all of us are on the same planet. So if the Earth were to encounter difficulties, we would have other humans who are able to help. And Alan Crowley also agrees with you. Let's do the right thing because it is the right thing. Kathy Pernisek says, thanks for the observations, John. Lots to think about. And I also want to highlight a recommendation that our friend John H. made of Waldo, a short story by Robert Heinlein. One can read more about it on Wikipedia. This is a story of a person who lived in microgravity in Earth's orbit. So going back to the discussion on the differential effects of gravity. So now we are about 10 minutes from the end of our virtual Enlightenment Salon. I would like to ask for closing remarks from the panelists, anyone who wishes to offer them, and then we will go to John for his closing statement. So who would like to begin with some closing remarks? Jason?
I would just like to echo John's point about, I really hope that when we start going out into space, that we really bring our ethics with us, and that the frontier isn't just dominated by corporate, interests, and that, as we encounter, whatever else is out there, we put our best foot forward, and not the the savage inside that we let our better angels of our nature speak for us, instead of what we've been doing for most of our evolution. And I hope so, and hopefully that's part of what we're doing here, is putting our best foot forward. So that's it. I'm optimistic, but I hope that we do the right thing.
Yes, and I think our friend Sergei Gubkin in the chat agrees with you. He believes the transhuman civilizations will progress not only in terms of technology and lifespan, but ethics as well. And I think we have to, in order to achieve new technological heights, because deploying the technologies effectively will require an improved ethical framework. That's one reason why we have these virtual Enlightenment salons, to prepare the society ethically for the next generation of technologies. And Sergei also points out that slavery got banned, as well as serfdom in countries like Russia, even a little bit before slavery was banned in the US. So slavery was banned in 1863 in some parts of the US, and then 1865 in the rest. And Tsar Alexander II banned serfdom in 1861. And the Nazi and communist regimes were condemned during the 20th century. And there have been other improvements as well. I think there's a lot more tolerance and acceptance of people of a variety of backgrounds, a variety of orientations and lifestyle choices, as compared to even 20 or 30 years ago in this country. So there has been a lot of social progress, a lot of moral progress. Jason, you mentioned The Better Angels of Our Nature, and of course, Steven Pinker has a book by that title that documents a lot of this progress. So I'm quite hopeful that we will be more enlightened and more ethical as we colonize space. So who would like to offer some additional closing statements? David?
Yeah, thanks, Gennady. I wanted to jump in on this topic of taking care of Earth, because Earth is the seed, if you will. Right now, we're talking about, you mentioned climate change and so forth, very valid, in my opinion, by the way. But also talking about space, think of all the satellites that are up in space now, and think of all the space junk that's up in space. And I realize there's some efforts to try to clean that up, but that's starting to sound an awful lot like, gee, we need to take care of the Earth. We also need to take care of what's floating around the Earth. And we've got a multinational form of international government, if you will, where countries have to agree and get out of each other's way and posture. And if you extend this out to the moon and to the Lagrange points around the Earth and the moon, and then on into Mars and the belt, there's a lot to consider here as far as we move out. Do you have any ideas or any thoughts on multinational laws and enforcement for taking care of the space that's around us and the places where humans are going to go?
Yes, John, we would be interested in your remarks on this.
Well, that's one of the things I've thought of for a long time. I think that there's going to have to be new laws done, but I think, I hate to say it, I think there's going to be some turmoil, and I hate to bring up Expanse again, but Expanse has a lot of issues that I have always worried about, because in that show, the people on Earth are fighting with and the moon are fighting with the people on Mars, and they're fighting with the people that are taking care of the belt. And I hate to say it, but I think that's going to happen. I think that's in our human nature. I think it might take some time to work out, but I think the frontier of space is going to rile up all the old problems that we've always had with our new frontiers. Even when we came to America and settled in America, how the troubles we had, and we had the Revolutionary War, and then we had the Civil War, and the Mexican, the little war with Mexico. I think we're gonna find that we're gonna have that again. The one thing I think it's gonna do is I think people on the Earth will probably unite against it'll probably be those damn people on the moon and those damn people on Mars. I think all of a sudden nobody will care what color and religion you are on Earth, because then you're an Earther. We're going to be Earthers, and they're going to be Mooners, or whatever you want to call them, Moonies. I think we've had Moonies before, but you're going to have the Martians, and I think there is going to be some fighting and some confrontation until it all settles down. But I think eventually it will settle down. I just think it's in human nature that it's going to be like that, and I think it'll have to get worked out. And let's put it this way: I hope it will get worked out, and I think it will. But I think there for a little bit there's going to be some rough times. I actually find it hard to believe that there won't be any rough times. But I think hopefully all human beings, we will eventually work it out. We worked it out with our revolution, our civil wars, and it gets worked out eventually. And I hope it will. I think it'll, like I said, I think though it will unite the people on the different planets. I think the people on Earth will be more united because they will feel the people on the moon and the Mars, or it'll become those them. I think human beings quite often have the wanting to point the finger at other groups. It'll give us different groups to unite against, which is sad in itself, but I think that's some of human nature, which I've said before too. People always say, oh, going to being, androids won't have that, or synthezoids, if you want to think about a synthezoid instead of an android. I think once you get things become intelligent, I think they're going to do the same thing. I think it's some sort of an instinct built for survival that comes in with intelligence, and it's a pity, but I think it's something that's there that has to be worked through. But I hope in the future that I think it'll all work out like it has so far in history.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, John. And this reminds me of The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which is a famous novel by Robert Heinlein about exactly the scenario you describe, where a rift forms between the lunar colonists and the population back on Earth. And I think Heinlein, of course, takes a sympathetic view toward the lunar colonists and their plight for independence, but definitely the human motivations are not going to go anywhere when we've colonized space. I also want to highlight a comment from Tom Ross, since his computer unexpectedly disconnected, but he has a closing thought. He hopes that we can develop an AI or virtual reality experience to give everyone the samadhi necessary to take our stewardship seriously. So we have a minute left in our virtual Enlightenment Salon. So John, I'm hoping you can give us some closing thoughts. And I believe you need to unmute.
Yes, that would help, wouldn't it? You should all be able to be getting my thoughts directly to you by this point. No, it was like I said, it was a great experience. I hope more and more people will get to experience edge of Earth flights, orbits of Earth, trips to the moon, even on a regular basis. I think we're in a great thing, and like I said on my first slide, that space, the next frontier. I think we are at that point where we can now consider ourselves space cowboys, hopefully, and be going out there to space, hopefully a little safer than we went out across the West. But I think it's a great time, and I hopefully help everybody gets to experience it, and I think they will. Like we say with the Explore Mars group, the first Martian is probably among us now. Some of the people that are going to be the first humans to live on Mars probably were already born and are going to be there. So I'm looking forward to the further exploration of space and all the science and technology that and medicine, even that the development and getting there can help with the rest of us.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, John, for those closing words and your fascinating story. Our audience enjoyed it greatly. In the words of Alan Crowley, sapiens of the planet, unite. And thank you to everybody on our panel And in our audience, please join us every Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern time for more of these kinds of fascinating interdisciplinary philosophical conversations. Until next time, live long and prosper.